All right, well, at this point, one of the things I'd like to do is begin to take stock in what we have looked at so far. I think it's reasonable to say that Neoplatonism represents a kind of zenith within the classical theories of aesthetic life and thought. And the reason that it represents this zenith is because of the rigor and philosophical acuity and spiritual sensibility by which it spiritualizes the very idea of beauty, right? Beauty is not merely something that we know through the senses, although it certainly comes through the senses. Beauty is not something that we simply use to bring ourselves in harmony with the world, although it certainly is part of that. Beauty is the rightness of the world itself, and that there is a way in which we commune with that and discover the nature of what we are through this. This is appreciating beauty, savoring beauty, understanding beauty is very much wrapped up in this. Indeed, sometime when I get back to doing some of my Asian thought, I'm going to talk about the idea of rasa in Brahmanical thought and some of the ways in which this parallels Neoplatonic ideas about beauty, because I think there's quite a bit there. Anyway, one of the things, that's just a shout out for all of you who are interested in these things. One of the things I'd point out with this is that this spiritualization of beauty that comes out of Plotinus is something that lends itself very well to the religious cosmology of the Middle Ages, and it also lends itself to the celebration of the human and the humane that comes with the Renaissance in the West. So that the Neoplatonic account of beauty, while it goes through many twists and turns, continues to be a deeply, deeply useful concept, useful philosophical approach for thinking about beauty. And what I want to do here is I want to take a moment to think about some of the pluses and minuses of this, because this idea of beauty that gets articulated in the West through Neoplatonism, I guess it's harbingered through Platonism, but it really gets its legs with Neoplatonism, is going to come back again and again and again. So it would probably be helpful for us to have a little bit of a look at this, to consider this, and then maybe within our threads discuss this back on the Blackboard page. As far as the strengths go, what can we say? What are, philosophically speaking, what are some of the strengths that we can say about the Neoplatonic account of beauty? Well, there's a few things. I think first of all, there's a way in which it makes beauty significant in a way that we sometimes forget. So often, there is a sense in which beauty is wrapped up with the physical, with what we fancy, what we like, what delights us. And of course, recognized from Plato onward, there's a huge problem with that. The problem is that these things are, by their very nature, fleeting, and thus tend to slip away. The very thing which delighted us, which gave us pleasure, which gave us all sorts of optimistic, not just emotions, but senses about the world, seems to slip away and almost contradict what was important about it. But you get an account of beauty like this, and you know what? That sense of importance resonates. So that there's a way in which, as we see the deeper dimensions of what's there, the deeper dimensions of the beauty, there's a way in which the beauty seems to disclose the significance that we presume it has to us and through itself. This is something that the Neoplatonic account of beauty really helps us with, right? There's a way in which this also speaks to the ineffability of beauty. And what I mean by that is, and this is the second reason I was getting at here, is that there's a sense in which beauty is something that we can never entirely locate in the thing. Again, Plato, and then even more so Plotinus, recognize that when we try to talk about beauty, if we try to say simply beauty is this thing, beauty is this face, beauty is this work of art, beauty is this motion, beauty is this sunset, whatever it is, we can't locate it anywhere. Beauty seems to pervade through the thing that we are considering, but it can't be of the thing we're considering. This way of spiritualizing beauty allows us not only to account for that, but to account for it in a very full and rich sort of way. Of course beauty is ineffable. Of course it pervades through but goes beyond things and transcends through them. That's precisely because of its nature, you know. And then third of all, I guess, it's something that it speaks to the way in which beauty transforms us, or at least transforms with us. There is a way in which beauty is something that can shake us. It can awaken us to ourselves, to our world, and there's a way in which, if it's not necessarily doing this or having this effect, it certainly evokes this emotion inside of us. Trying to speak to that and having a sense of that, that's an important aspect of beauty. And if beauty were simply a matter of taste, if it were simply a matter even of delight or pleasure, there's a way in which it wouldn't really make sense to talk about this aspect of beauty. But the Neoplatonic way of thinking about beauty in this regard, it does allow for that. It does allow for us to say, as I come to see the depths of beauty, I come to discover that I and my world are more than I had immediately imagined. And this is an advantage. So it seems on one hand that Neoplatonism and the spiritualization of beauty have quite a bit to say for themselves, and that's probably one of the reasons why the Neoplatonic ideas about beauty in one fashion or another continue to resonate in different discussions about aesthetics all through the history of it, up through today in one fashion or another. But there's also some weaknesses, or at least some considerations, aspects that are problematic, if you like, that I should probably mention. And the things that are more going to come up as we get into the modern era, but I'll anticipate them a little right now, put them out there for you to consider. For one thing, this way of talking about beauty makes art beholden to beauty, right? And specifically to the ideals and to the limits of beauty. So that art must be beautiful in order to be art. Now, if we say that, if maybe we don't want to imply that. Maybe we want to say, no, you can have art and it's not necessarily beautiful. But if beauty has this much stock to the world, well, then this is something that we really have to account for. There's a sense in which art becomes more craft or cheap or illegitimate in some way, at least as art, as the aesthetic depth that it seems to have, if it's not beautiful. And I'm not sure we want to say that. Some aspects of art can be quite disturbing. They can be repugnant, and not in a cathartic way, the way we talked about with Aristotle, just simply so. But I'm not sure that that necessarily makes it non-art, right? That doesn't compromise it. Secondly, there's a way in which the Neoplatonic account of beauty downplays the physical and dynamic aspects of the world. Yes, it is a strength to recognize that the very nature of those things that we embrace ought to continue to resonate, and this gives the significance of it, as I was just saying a little while before. But there is a way in which when we encounter the world, when we encounter delight, the delight is in the physical. It is in the immediacy. It is in the dynamic happening of the thing, and we want to be able to engage that, to embrace it as it is and for what it is. Why is it that truth, if it's going to be truth, if it's going to have this deep aspect of reality, must be permanent, must stay? I'm not sure that that necessarily is the case. It may be, and there are a lot of philosophies that are going to account for that, not just in aesthetics, but overall. But it is a question we need to ask here, right? A third thing I guess I would bring up with regard to this is that the Neoplatonic account of beauty seems to suggest that beauty has to be one thing. Why does beauty have to be one thing? Isn't it possible, perhaps, that beauty, or our senses of what we refer to beauty, is not one thing but a myriad of things? That it applies in all sorts of different directions in different ways? And that there are forms of beauty that, while they might share the name, are, at least as far as what is most significant about them, irreconcilable as a single concept, right? Maybe they're two separate concepts, maybe they're bound together by something else, but that it's not some ideal that's out there. So this is a third question or a problematic area of beauty. And then one last thing, and it actually is the strength too. It goes back to this ineffability of beauty. If beauty is indeed this grand spiritual achievement that transforms and awakens us to reality, it makes sense to say that, well, we can't define it or limit it. And yet, everyone out there knows it when they see it. Shouldn't we in some way be able to define it, to identify it, to articulate it? This seems basic to the idea of it. So, some problematic aspects of the Neoplatonic ideas of beauty.